To me, parkour is just a vehicle to character development, right? Like that's just my take on it. I'm not saying that needs to be everybody's take, but it's my take. And I think that the sort of like conditioning, pushing yourself, being uncomfortable, being okay in that space, like for me, that was a lot of what was profound about my parkour experience.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Takeoff. I am your host, Max Henry, and on today's episode, I've got longtime friend and lovely parkour fellow nerd Adam McClellan from Pennsylvania. He's part of the Parkour Generations Americas crew and somebody that has been on my radar since way, way back in the old American Parkour Forum days when he was living out in Hawaii. And we get into that. This conversation actually evolved for me from a chat that we had at Move NYC. He was there, we were playing with our kids, hanging out, and we started talking about his new coaching endeavor, Parkour Professionals, and what that means and why it seems to be so hard for parkour people to understand what it is to be professional in both the coaching context and also just kind of in a cultural context. And we talk about what our community has kind of missed in the last couple of years, where maybe it might be good to dive back into some of the roots from the Yamakaze parkour generations, more spirit of movement side of things, where that maybe goes wrong and leaves people hanging and leaves them wanting more, and what a balance could look like for the future, and how gym owners, business owners in parkour can tap into both the kind of strength of the culture and philosophy behind the movement that got so many of us interested in parkour in the beginning, but also tap into all the athletic development that we've learned about since then, so that we're not just QMing on the ground for hours and hours, but we're developing real skills that are rooted in a deep and meaningful practice. So this is one of my favorite episodes. I would say it gets a little bit nerdy and businessy in the middle. If you're not into that, feel free to skip it. I think the first third and the last third are phenomenal for people who are not in the sort of parkour business space, but we did want to get a little bit more nuts and bolts for those of you who are gym owners or who are coaches and are interested in that. But even if you do start to drop off there, I'd highly recommend going forward, because we do come back, and I think there's a lot of really great takeaways for people who are just interested in building a stronger, more connected parkour community. Adam McClellan, welcome to the Takeoff.
Thanks,
How are you
Max.
doing today, man?
I'm good. You know what? I'll be honest. I'm exhausted. I got off a plane at 5 a.m. my local time, drove 2 hours back home, and took a nap. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm good. So I'm ready to go.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and you're in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. So where's the closest airport for you? Is that Philly?
I'm pretty equidistant to Philly, which is like an hour and a half south of me, and Newark, which is like a hour and a half, like directly east.
That those neither of those are airports that want to frequent regularly, unfortunately. So,
Listen, I'm gonna make an
what is
argument.
it?
I'm going to make an argument. Okay, Newark has to be the unfriendliest airport in the world, but it is the most efficient airport in the world, and I will die on that hill. I don't want to talk
The
to
only
anyone there, but
time,
they will get me where I need to go.
okay, because I was gonna say my only time flying through Newark, I had to make a transfer, and every way to transfer between terminals had broken down. It was pouring rain. None of their buses were working, and I had to walk like literally a mile and a quarter to
Oh
get
wow,
from where I was to and it was all outside, minus a few sections that were like covered, that connected bus terminal to bus terminal of the non-functioning buses. So my impression of Newark was
that's very
incredibly
poor. You should
negative.
you should swing
Yeah.
by again and go to Terminal
Okay.
A, which they totally redid, and it's beautiful. They have like amazing kids play spaces. Like I think maybe better
That's
than
cool.
any airport I've ever seen. It's actually there's like kind of a Ninja Warrior course in Terminal A. Real talk.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty. So maybe they were working on that during your time. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they were like testing to see if adding a non-bus speed run by pedestrian route
Oh
was
wait, Max Henry's coming. We
a
got to do some
functional
science.
fitness. Yeah, exactly. What were you traveling for work?
I just came from California. I was
Oh,
doing
nice.
some consulting and doing some coach development, sales training, that kind of stuff.
What a perfect transition, because you're luckily wearing the shirt for Parkour Professionals.
Hmm.
We just got to chat at Move NYC a couple weeks ago, and it's always very fun to reconnect. And we inevitably talked about something that has come up quite often on this podcast, which is the name of your brand, Parkour Professionals, why so many people in parkour struggle to just being relatively normal adults that also do a sport. And I do want to dig into that, but before that, would you mind giving me a little bit of your background and how you got into parkour, how you ended up or have continued to be in Lehigh Valley, all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah. How do I answer that question without boring people? I guess I started when I was 15, which is just about 20 years ago now, 14 or 15, something like that. In the classic way, I watched Russian climbing, I watched three run, all the classic old school pre-YouTube videos that are in the dark corners of the internet that I tripped over. I had a couple of, I was already doing martial arts at the time. So I had a couple of buddies, and we like to do dive rolls and backflips and things, just from being movement martial arts, Jackie Chan people. So we tripped over the videos. We went outside. We tried to copy them. We jumped off roofs and climbed walls. And at my first ever parkour session, we went to the hardware store so we could get like fingerless gloves because we thought like for sure that's the cool thing you have to do. So we were just those kids.
Fingerless gloves have also come up a surprising number of times on this
Yeah,
podcast.
it's like just like the wristband, like the tennis wristbands that people wear. It's just one of those like unique little things.
Yep.
So yes, it ages people. Anyway, did that for like a year or so, and then my family moved to Hawaii for a year. My parents thought they were going to retire there. Surprise on them, it was 2008, so wrong time to try to sell a house and buy one in Hawaii. So we spent a
Yeah.
year there. I was lucky enough to connect with a guy named Ozzy Quintero. I'm sure very few people now know who Ozzy is, but he was more known then. He had just kind of started the Hawaii parkour community. And I can barely remember. I think he found me through some random clip on like MySpace or something. Insane. He invited me to an open gym session, and I had the time of my life as like a 16-year-old kid. Met up with this like 30-year-old, and we jumped around, and I had a blast. And I had a little bit of a teaching background just from martial arts and a movement background. And he was like, "Hey, do you want to like help me teach some classes and do this and that?" So as a new 16-year-old with no friends and a kind of wrecked social life because I just up and moved to the other side of the globe, at least it felt that way. I was really grateful to kind of like have a little community to join into. So to make that story short, I ended up doing some coaching in Hawaii. Me and him and a guy named Richard, and some help from a guy named David, we kind of started the Hawaii parkour community, and we advanced the urban current. There's the old tutorials on YouTube, the
Yeah.
urban current
That was my
tutorials.
first time seeing you
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
Urban Current
Probably
tutorials on the
2009 is my
APK
guess.
forums.
When we were doing the
Yeah.
advanced roll tutorial, was pretty popular on the forums, I think.
Yep.
So yes, so that took me into about 2010. Moved back to no 2009. Moved back to Lehigh Valley when my parents realized they can't pay for two houses, and we moved back into our Pennsylvania one. And that's when I
They
started
call
Lehigh
Lehigh
Valley.
Valley the Hawaii of Pennsylvania. Just
Well, that would be a stretch. That would be a stretch. I loved Lehigh Valley though; it's a beautiful place. So I started Lehigh Valley Parkour. So I was a business owner in 2009, and started teaching outdoor classes. That led to teaching, like partnering with gymnastics gyms, doing the classic thing where you slowly rent space and develop a student base. Right around that time, I also connected with Parkour Generations. I went to the first American Rendezvous in Ohio, and loved it. I mean, got to, I think, Chow and Laurent and Dan Edwards, and
Kazuma there at that one as
Kazuma
well?
was not
Or was
there
that
at
the
the
next
first
year?
one.
Okay.
Yeah, there was anyway, a whole bunch of people. There was like 5 or 6 different founders, and so it was really inspirational to train with them and get to know. Jan was there. Uh, and then following that, got connected with Adapt. So I took the first ever Adapt level 1 in, I don't know, I don't even want to say the year, I'd be wrong, a while ago, the year of a while ago. And so that really got me in, like, training with Ozzy, we were just like an isolated, like, hey, this is the way we train, but we love to break down movements. We love to condition our bodies, challenge ourselves. Like, we met PK Gen and we were like, whoa, we really resonate with like this kind of training and this vibe. So I kind of latched onto them, and I've been kind of in the Parkour Generations community ever since then.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you were in Hawaii, I remember that community in that time, like 2008, 2009. I say this now to people, and they don't believe me if they've gotten into parkour more recently, but at that time, the American parkour community felt a lot closer to MoveNat or CrossFit
Mhm.
than anything resembling the parkour community now. And you
100%.
guys, I feel like Urban Current was pretty in on the like MoveNat adjacent training.
I would credit like Ryan Ford's conditioning videos and Urban Current and Ozzy and his influence on like conditioning. I think, yeah, there was like a community of people who were like, I think we should probably get strong before we jump off roofs. And I don't know where we got that impression from, but we did. And we all somehow agreed that we should hang on walls and do QM and do that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, PK Gen had exactly that. They're like, what if we just QM'd all the time? Because they kind of came from the founders and their insane
Hmm.
training methodologies. So, yeah, there was like yeah, that was definitely the culture. It wasn't at all the sort of Instagram big moves stuff that you see. Other countries maybe, but not the U.S. To your point.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was very not skill development was deprioritized for sure, which is kind of the opposite of where things are at now. And that's actually maybe an interesting thing to kind of start talking about in coaching because I think parkour generations gets a mixed reputation depending on who you talk to in the community because a lot of the I think a lot of the people who would say that they're like part of the PK Gen community and a lot of the coaches do deprioritize pure like skill work
Hmm.
in a lot of classes compared to many others. What do you feel like and I have my thoughts on this, and I want to let you answer first, but what do you feel like you've learned about from your perspective and how you do it in your gym, what the benefit is and like what that balance is for you between sort of the skill aspect of parkour, developing, an 8-year-old who can double Kong or like reverse to speed step or something versus the softer skills of parkour and the like harder conditioning skills. How do you balance all three of those?
I think to me, and I'm sure this concept will tie into everything. I mean, to me, parkour is just a vehicle to character development, right? Like that's just my take on it. I'm not saying that needs to be everybody's take, but it's my take. That's how it impacted me. So it's kind of the lens that I see it. And I think that the sort of like conditioning, pushing yourself, being uncomfortable, being okay in that space, like for me, that was a lot of what was profound about my parkour experience. The things that ring true to me, like, yes, I did jump off roofs and I was proud when I got my first dash vault and I was excited about my first double Kong or my first backflip. But even though those were motivating and those were achievements that I remember, they weren't as profound as the 1 hour straight of QM or the handstand block with Laurent that I completed or the idea of just like spending 3 hours doing tough stuff with Ozzy and then getting an acai bowl at the end of it and the community that came with that. There's something way more profound about that effort, culture of effort type of training as opposed to just the culture of skill development training that maybe is a little more at the forefront today. So I think I just appreciate that, and I don't want to lose it. So it's the PK Gen community for me reflects that a little bit more. That like culture of effort, that old school like push yourself, see where your limits are, but not just technically, also physically. And then as I get older, I think I more and more appreciate that because it's like an accessible way to find your limits. You can't go out every day and do your biggest running pre or your biggest rail pre at height or your biggest cat leap, but you can go out every day and go, can I shave some time off my mile? Like we were chatting about a move in OIC. Can I go a little bit further with my QM? Can I hold this position hanging on a wall for longer? To me, that's actually more accessible as a form of training. So that's why for me, it's still a really integral part of parkour.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say vehicle for character development because I agree, and this is maybe where I'm also curious your thoughts. Sometimes I think we turn that into like this moralization of parkour as a unique training methodology when really like any training modality that people create a narrative around
Hmm.
can be that vehicle. Um, because if you're trying something hard and you're in a community that supports that, like whether it's
You get that
CrossFit or
benefit.
track and field, general
100%.
athletics, right? You're getting those same benefits. Um, I, I agree that I think I really look back to Blaine, Chris Rowett's article Dilution, which I think he wrote in 2007, and it seemed like he had kind of at that point it was incredibly accurate, but it was this sort of surface level analysis of the community where it's like people are doing 15-foot height drops And then at 16, they get Osgood-Schlatter's and they drop out because they're not strong enough. And I feel like we've seen on a meta level sort of another layer
Yeah.
to this narrative of dilution, which is that a highly sport specific or like skill oriented approach to parkour self selects the people who almost exactly didn't do parkour in the early days because they weren't particularly physically gifted. Like I
Yeah.
was, dropped out of many other sports because I either didn't like to compete or I didn't like to be, pushed in a group setting in a like very skill driven way. And it's interesting to me to see the different ways that people now are kind of talking about the parkour ecosystem, whether it's for, coaches who are looking to engage more kids or people like wondering why we have a funnel and there's a huge youth program and then the kids get to 12 or 13 or 14 and all of a sudden they start to drop out. I definitely personally see this meta problem where our story is once you've learned all of the skills, where do you go from here? It just has to become bigger, faster, harder. And there's only so far that can take it. So how do you, I guess, what's your impression of that story and how do you see that kind of happen in your gym? And then now with Parkour Professionals, maybe from there we can jump into that.
Sure. I mean, I think I couldn't agree with you more, and I think you're onto something powerful because, like, something that's so I'm going to use the word profound a lot. Something that's profound about parkour to me is that idea of like this is not an instant gratification sport. You don't just get the win and go home. Like there's stuff you have to earn. You have to recognize that it takes time to achieve things, and this notion of like parkour is like a checkbox of moves that once you check them out, like hey, I got my double full, I got my double Kong, I finally landed my 360 cat leap. Like what's so cool about parkour is you could think you know how to do a step vault, but then be in a slightly tweaked or different environment and realize, whoa, I haven't applied the step vault to this. Like that's I think a unique thing about parkour versus many sports.
Mm-hmm.
So I always sort of I don't know, I don't want to sound frustrated is the wrong word. I get a little sad when I see so much focus on like I achieved a move, now I did it. What's the next move for me to do? When for me, rather like parkour is like no, you can like train things in an infinite format and never quite feel satisfied, but then look back 6 months and go, wow, I've really improved a lot just from the focus that I put into it. So yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to not get like try to get that instant gratification. And yes, that's a challenge in the modern, particularly American approach to gym-based, curriculum-based, business-based coaching. You know, how do you do that? But yeah, I think like, and you're right. Any sport with a good coach who like has mentorship capacity and leadership capacity um, can do that. I mean, martial arts is almost entirely based on the idea of like you do karate to learn discipline and confidence and respect, and that's pretty much the marketing of every decent karate school in the country. um, so I agree that it's not unique to parkour, but I do think that parkour has some unique stripped down ways to get those benefits. And hopefully, if we stay professional about it, stripped down without some of the unnecessary things that exist in gymnastics that aren't good, or exist in martial arts that aren't good.
I was wondering where you're going with that stripped down
That's where
transition.
I'm going
I was
with
like,
that.
are you going into the coaching coaching and athletic fitness fits specifically what they're wearing. No, yeah, this is like a thing that comes up a lot. So it's been really interesting because it came up when I was chatting with Callan Lavington, who's been doing a ton of social media content. It came up with Jimmy Davidson, came up with pretty much everybody that's in this sort of like meta parkour space is how important narrative is. And I think that the thing that so many people miss is like when parkour was the most popular statistically. Well, it's hard to say because we're going off of like search and query stuff. And a lot of it is like if 80% of the people have searched for parkour in 2007 to 2011, they're not going to search it again. They know what it is. So
Right.
hypothetically, when it was the most actively searched in the late 2000s, the narrative around parkour was like the training was so much more about trying to just do something hard that didn't necessarily build skills. And it was like people were happy with a speed vault, a con vault,
Uh-huh.
a dive con. Like 90% of the people that did parkour, they hit a couple core things. They'd come to a big jam like Beast Coast or American Rendezvous or PKNY, and they'd QM up some stairs in the sun or the rain and sweat with their friends and have this experience. And like nobody there really, I think the core group, that 90%, didn't really care if they got better at parkour. They were there for this experience of community and challenge and pushing themselves. And then the sort of 10% who really did care continued to progress. And because of the nature of the internet and how accomplishment is, I think,
Rewarded.
elevated
Yeah.
in the digital space, right? Like those people, including myself, became louder and louder voices in, I think, how parkour was perceived and how it was portrayed. And even to this day, I think we focus on narrative, and it's like that's the narrative that appeals to the 10% of people who have a strong athletic base that are, competitively driven, even if it's in a non-competitive. Something Dylan Poland said in a recent podcast was like, jams are inherently competitive. Like it's not a negative one-upmanship, but it is about building up a challenge together with other people. And if that's not your personality, it's very easy for you to come into the space, learn the things you want to learn, drop out. Or even if it is your personality, you suddenly hit your 30s, and like we were talking about off air, you turn around too fast and you tweak your oblique or your neck, or your
Yeah.
kid whacks you in the face with their doll toy, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I can't really train as hard as I wanted to this week, or and that happens more regularly, and
Yeah.
it becomes this question of like, well, what do we do there? And I think that going back, and I guess I'll somehow turn this into a question in a second. Going back to those core values of community and challenge, and kind of thinking about what appealed to a lot of the athletes that have left the sport early on, as opposed to what appeals to us now, the people who stayed in it. Like I look at myself and I'm like, I will love parkour no matter what happens. Everybody else in the world could stop training. Instagram could crash forever. I'm still going to go out and train
Right. So I'm going to
probably as
balance on
much
that
as
rail
I
for
do
an hour
now.
and feel what you feel. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such an internally like fundamental part of my personality and an internally driven process for me. But for the people who dropped out, like that's where I see like what did they feel like changed in the community? So I don't want to harp on this too much because I don't want people to feel like it's a couple of old guys yelling at
Yeah.
clouds.
Or parkour's
But I
dying.
think
We're elitist. Yeah.
exactly, because I don't think it's dying. I think it's growing simultaneously. But I think what we can learn from this is like we've figured out a really good way to communicate what's cool about parkour to
Mhm.
that 10 or 20% of people who fall into that bucket of like athletically driven, interested in the skill acquisition, interested in the sort of like Instagram highlight aspect. So what do you feel like if we were going to tap into the rest of it based off of what you see now in your classes and based off of what you experienced? Where are we missing that other 60 to 80%?
I mean, it's hard. I think I was having a like I don't know 10 years ago or something. Time isn't real anymore. I was having a conversation with Stani, who's an amazing Frenchman who's well connected to the founders, but also like in the modern space. He's a nice little keystone, I think, to like parkour. He and I were talking about like the definition of parkour, and sort of together we developed that like if you had a big sort of pirate map, like a big sheet of paper, and we said this is what parkour is. Um, you have like discipline, training, conditioning, QM, old school stuff, and that's kind of all in some corner. They're like PK Gen founders, Yamakaze stuff. And maybe on like the opposite corner, you have like competition and skill development, social media, and you have like business somewhere in there, and you have like, you have sport and competitions in this space somewhere. You have like community and social and connection, and like there's so much to the world and the culture of parkour, and I think it's all valid, which is like how I want to defend myself from being like the old fart complaining about how parkour used to be. Like I think there's so much space for all the things that are parkour. I think the only thing I fight against is like excluding a large part of it. Like, hey, we love competitions in parkour, our gym or our business or our community. We train for comps, and that's what we do because that's what parkour is. It's like, well, but nobody's standing on a rail for an hour and experiencing what that is. And in the same way, if all your community does is queue them upstairs all day, like congrats on like your calisthenic outdoor training methodology, I guess. But like you're missing the fact that there's like incredible skill development and like this very unique movement pattern that is what parkour is. Like you should also be trying to up those skills. So I think there's so much movement that you can have in what the practice of parkour is. Is it a sport? Or is it a discipline? Or is it an art? Or is it a form of expression? I think the answer is yes, which is why I like it. It's why I chose it over martial arts or, whatever else. So that's, for me, that's kind of the upside is like there's so much landscape to explore in parkour. And it's also okay to kind of set up a camp that you prefer somewhere around it. Like, hey, there's a strength and conditioning and training, I would say, area that's been recently explored and dove into in the past 10 years that, even though the founders love to condition, they certainly didn't do it from a strength and conditioning point of view with no knowledge whatsoever. Whereas with, people like you, there are people with backgrounds who've done research, who have access to modern science, but experientially understand parkour that are connecting those dots. So like, that's a cool new little part of the map that's being unfolded. Like, I love it. I think it's so cool that we can do that. I just don't want us to like lose parts of the map that are meaningful.
I think the map metaphor is a really good one because a map implies an overview.
Yeah.
So it implies that somebody who is being introduced to the sport or who is immersed in the sport can step back and see where they can go. And I think that a key part of when we're talking about narrative, and I think this is where I want to tie it into, where we'll talk about coaching and what you're doing with Parkour Professionals. For me, a key part of being a coach and a key part of telling stories in parkour, connecting to people, is being able to hold the map and not
Mhm.
being inside the map. So I can look and say, oh, you thought Matt McCreary's video was really cool? Yeah, that's awesome. That's a total, like, we can do that kind of movement. And, if that's a little bit difficult for you, you might need to build a little bit more strength. And we can do it by either going the founder's route of imitating Bruce Lee and Dragon Ball anime training montages and doing a ton of that, or you can go like a more S&C route, or whatever, kind of adapting it to people's needs, but having the perspective that parkour is it's not on a linear path of development, and that we can always go back. And that's something that whenever, and I'm sure you're in the same boat. I have so many friends who are not in the sport anymore, and I still see them. And at Move NYC, I got to see a couple after the event, just chatting with them, and like, yeah, I just feel like the sport's changed. And I'm like, I'm in, and no, it's just what you see in the sport may have changed, but you can always go back. Like,
Yeah.
nothing stops you from finding a community or building a community or training in a way that was fun for you in 2011, other than, I mean, there are very valid like external and internal pressures that you experience when you're kind of fighting a current, but being able to think of it as that map, and you're like, oh, I was living in this land,
Yeah.
but I kind of want to go back and explore this land a little bit,
Yeah.
is super helpful. So for a coach, and if feel free to add anything before we transition if you want to, but from the perspective of a coach, a gym owner, what you're doing now with your consulting, why don't you tell me a little bit about the goal behind Parkour Professionals and how you think that ties into what seems like a pretty, I don't know if that was all off the cuff. It seems like you have a pretty articulated vision of this like broader ecosystem that is parkour.
Yeah, I mean, that was like it was off the cuff and it was a very old thing. And I was like, oh, I remember that really cool analogy you used to use. Um, Yeah, I mentioned that like character development is kind of like a fundamental keystone to parkour training for me. Again, that's just me. Like I have a very well defined like mission in life. Like I have a mission statement, and I very much live by it. I'm a big believer in like the sort of 7 habits of highly effective people approach to principle guided living. And my mission statement is to make the world a better place by improving the character of the people who are in it. That's like my guiding light. If I'm not doing something that accomplishes that goal, then it's not worth me doing. It's as simple as that for me. And so I've kind of chosen parkour for that reason, and therefore, like coaching is a pretty obvious extension of that as a way to do that. So I got to experience some amazing internal, profound experience in character development from my training. So then I immediately switched to coaching, thinking, how can I share this with other people? And then I kind of realized, well, I need to learn and scale business to do that. And so I expanded my business world and realizing I can impact more and more people by growing a business. And then it was also a pretty natural progression to go, all right, I seem to have wrapped my head around these business systems and people systems. How can I multiply this even more? So instead of just running a business or a few businesses in my area, how can I now become someone to kind of help others and guide them to do that same thing? And so for me, like there's a heart to business. There's like a mission to business. I don't being sort of one of the business guys in parkour. I think I take some heat for like being a capitalist or being money focused or whatever. But I think anyone who really knows me knows that like that's just not what I'm here for. It's that for me, business is like such a powerful avenue to expand your work. Money is a resource and it's a powerful resource, and you can use it to do what you want to do in the world. And so being able to like have a mature understanding of business and use it to accomplish whatever mission is important to you, like I try to do in my life. That's really what like Parkour Professionals is about. Is like how do we connect the heart or the passion of what you have, which almost every parkour business owner, gym owner, program runner, coach, they have something like that. Like it's like parkour is meaningful to nearly everybody who practices it. I'm not unique. Um, but I'm unique in that I've been able to connect it to business practices, connect it to sales principles, connect it to coaching practices and pedagogy, so that we can see where doing the right thing matches what it is that we believe in, and then move forward into that more professional space without losing the heart of why we're here. I think that's really sort of that's the dream, that's the mission, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Where have you found the biggest sticking points to be in that like potential conflict between sharing the mission and the reality of running a business with coaches who are potentially burnt out or parents who just want their kid to run around for 45 minutes?
I think a lot of people, but especially parkour people, have a particular aversion to like the word sales and what they think it means, or the word money or profit or what they think it means. That's a hard, like, I spend a lot of my time like just overcoming people's paradigms of like, what do those words mean and how do they impact you? For me, like something that usually helps me get where I need to be with people and their perceptions is the notion that like sales is just like a dirty word that really should just be education. If I'm selling you a used car that's going to break the minute you buy it, I think that's how people think of like sales. They think of a car salesman who's trying to manipulate you. So yeah, I get that it has like a bad connotation. But if you were doing good ethical sales, that car salesman would say, well, let me educate you on what's going to happen with this car. This is the maintenance that's going to be required, but it is going to be cheap up front. This is the lifestyle you'll have with it. Does this match your goals? Is this what you're looking for with a car? And for some people, the answer is yes. I can fix cars myself. I'm really hands-on. I just want a cheap entry point, and I want to do this. That would be ethical salesmanship, and it's not nearly as weird. And so for us, it's like if we know what parkour can do, if we believe in the value of it, we know what product we're selling and how it can make an impact in a child or an adult student's life. Just educating people what that is, which is what we do in our coaching classes. So you just need to like also do it at your front desk or on the phone or wherever you do your sales. If you can develop that mindset that like I'm just teaching people what this is all about, to me that's what sales means. And that's, I think, like sort of a paradigm shift for some people that's so important, because it's like, no, it's not. You're not like asking people for money. You're asking them if you can improve their life. And oh, by the way, to do that, it requires a little bit of payment because we have bills to pay and amazing coaches to pay, and there's just a natural transaction to that. And that's a paradigm shift for a lot of folks, especially us like anti-establishment, access oriented. All I needed to do was buy shoes to get into this sport people. It's a little hard.
Yeah, I resonate very powerfully with that. I think that reframing is really helpful. I don't know. I've heard that reframing before, but I think also pointing out that sales can be ethical, and a
It
lot of
should
the
be.
best, I mean, and it should be, and the companies that I look up to the most, we were just at Move NYC, like what Jesse's done with the movement creative. I think there are so many, there was street movement in Denmark, a lot of companies in parkour that have a very powerful framework for communication and feedback and
Mhm.
ethical ways of business that I really look up to. And every time I have dipped my toe. I mean, even like the parkour roadmap, the amount of copies that I gave away for free, to the point that I even mailed. I like kid you not, I mailed, like, purchased copies for myself. This is not to like clap my, this is not a like, hey, good job, Max. This is like, never do, this is a terrible business practice. And like, I had to work through something, but I would like buy copies and mail them to people. They're like, I really want your book, but I can't afford it. And I'm like, well, it's only $14 if I buy it because I can get it at cost. So I'll pay for it. And then I'll pay like the $8 for shipping, and then like they'll enjoy it. And I know so many parkour people that have had very similar experiences, whether it's giving away their coaching for free or traveling to somebody to then coach them for free. And it's challenging because it creates an ecosystem where you feel like that is the ethical professional thing to do. You want to have that education, and you're so passionate about that. You're like, well, if I put all my time and energy into this, the other stuff will follow. But realistically, you're just creating a system that people assume what you have is kind of theirs for the taking. And instead of letting them, trusting them to be adults and figure it out and find a way to like make it as accessible as you can to them, but it's still in their court, you're kind of infantilizing them almost.
Yeah, there's like a saying, I'm probably getting it word for word wrong, but the sort of like do the right thing and the people will come type of attitude to business sometimes. I get
Hmm.
it. Like there's a principle behind that that I can get behind. But that's a little bit like saying, "Oh, I want to get way better at parkour. So if I do the moves, the skill will come." It's like, well, actually you will do better if you like systematize your training a little bit and educate yourself on how to do it best, effective. Like, not that you can't struggle through and find a hard way to do it and get it done. Like, yeah, that is totally doable. It's just that like maybe there's a better way that will come from just a little bit of like thought, education, work, and discipline. And that's sort of like how it is with business. It's like, yeah, you could just like give your book away for free and hope that maybe one day it reaches enough people that someone along the way goes like, "Ah, everyone has to buy this book," and he's such a good guy. But and like that could be true. It's not that that isn't a path to success. It's just that if you create some structures around your sales practice, your business, your model, in the same way that if we do it with our training or with our coaching and our expectations of kids in a class, like there are so many analogies that prove this concept true that I think it like we just have to accept that that's also true for business, that we have to draw fair boundaries, fair expectations for ourselves, because unfortunately it's very often like the owner or the founder or the person who's the head coach, whoever's carrying the burden of those sacrifices, or the author, it's the person who's carrying the burden of those sacrifices that ends up sort of paying the price. And that's just not the goal. That's sort of like, oh, I'll just have to get injured in order to get better at my skills. Like, no, you don't have to take that path. You can just be smarter about what you're doing and reward yourself. So there's almost like this masochism to business and parkour of like, I shouldn't be making money. Like, if anyone should be sleeping in the gym, it should be me. And like, yeah, take care of your team, obviously. I think that's duh, like be a good moral business owner or a good leader. But also like you have to take care of yourself to sustain what you're doing, and it's okay to do that. And that's
Hmm.
that's I think also a hard thing for the sort of anti-establishment parkour business owner or program runner person to wrap their head around, is like, I deserve to be a little successful because of the work that I've done.
Yeah. There's also a narrative, because this is such a theme. I had never thought about this, but the meme of parkour gym owner who's like sleeping homeless in their gym, because from Mark Turok days, sleeping in the old APK gym with a little bucket to get himself up into the attic of that fire station, to, I mean, I know Brandon, when he was working at Apex, Rob, many of the Colorado people lived in the gym for significant extended periods of time. I think you're right that there's a narrative that like that's part of the hard work.
Hmm.
And sometimes maybe it has to be if you have put everything else in place and you're like, well, it's either, and this is something that I think again, to kind of highlight Jesse, because he's somebody that I have worked with extensively in the past, and I did see many times where he was like, I can't afford to pay everybody here what I have promised, so I'm going to pay myself nothing to pay my coaches what we had agreed the rate would be. And if you're building a good team, they will not want you to do that. The amount of times that I had to pull Jesse aside, I'm like, "Jesse, you need to be giving yourself a salary. Like, you're working 110 hours a week and driving 500 miles in, like, the New York tri-state area hauling equipment and scaffolding and not sleep. Like, this is not as sustainable. It's not good for the business. It's not good for you, and it's not good for the coaches who feel when you have built that relationship where everybody kinda trusts each other, they want everybody to succeed as
Well,
well.
especially in the world, like when you're the owner of the business, I feel pretty strongly about this. When you're the owner of the business, like I think we say a lot of like, oh, that person makes a ton of money and why are they so rich? And I think that like the reason it's okay for you to make um I'll use the phrase like lots of money or to be like a wealthy person or to make more money than anyone who works for you. I think that's only valid and okay if you are also the person who's willing to take the risk, because that's sort of what that buys you. Like
Mhm.
if you're like, hey, everybody's going to get a paycheck before me, and that's okay. Like I think that's a fair practice, especially if you're, it's one thing if you're also working full time. I think you should like pay yourself if you're in the business and working. If you are an employee of yourself, you should pay yourself as that employee. That's good business practice. But outside of that, like, yeah, you should definitely make sure you hit payroll and all the people who did the work can do that. I have no tolerance for owners who like have money but aren't paying their people who did work. That's just a like non-negotiable for me. So like because you're carrying that burden as an owner and you're taking the risk of I will be the last person to get paid, I think that also means that when there is money, that it's okay to have it because that's the nature of taking the risk. If somebody else wants to step up, take the risk, put a bunch of money up front, be the one who has to work the 110 hours because if no one else does, then it's got to get done. Like if you're willing to step up and be that person, then you too, I think, get to keep the extra profits that land in the bank above and beyond what's set up. Like that's they're I've probably turned off a few listeners just by saying that out loud, but I think that's important for us to wrap our heads around. Like it's okay to it's okay that you have to hold the responsibility, but it's also okay to reap the rewards of that. That's the nature of not being an employee. If you don't want to take those risks, then go find someone to work for, and they absolutely should pay your paycheck as promised. That's their obligation. But if
Yeah.
you want to take some risk with a potential of higher reward, start a business. That's you know our country.
Mhm. Yeah, and you should be able to own at least 10 to 15,000 times more in liquid assets at any given time through stock than your lowest paid employee. I think that that's fundamental to the American system. I think there's what you're also for anybody who is afraid of that. There's obviously levels to this game of a small business,
Right.
a small business employer who is able to make a living wage that can sustain
which
themselves
is
and their
which is eighty
business.
percent of what we're talking about in this community. The number of like
Yeah.
millionaires running parkour gyms right now is a pretty slim number. So yes, really, we're talking about from
Slim
parkour
pickings.
context, we're talking about like yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay to put some money aside so you can buy a house for your family. Parkour gym owner, you deserve that because you've been working for 10 years at your dream. Like it's all right. It's all
Mhm.
right to have that goal for yourself.
Yeah, so let's dig into the name a little bit before we get any farther afield. Parkour professionals. What do you mean by that, Adam? Are you implying that some parkour people are unprofessional in some ways?
I think everyone, including myself, is unprofessional in some ways. But it's good to set a goal, right?
Good answer.
Yeah, I think. I mean, alliteration was probably my number one reason for choosing the name. But the second reason, it's true. I mean, I think a lot of people wish to stay the way they are, and that's fine. I don't need to change every person to think about the world the way I do. But I do come from a pretty unique background. That's kind of what separates me. Like I am definitely an old school parkour guy. Like I was there with the founders. I've been through the history of parkour. 20 years is there's not many people who are beyond 20 to 25 years in the U.S. still doing stuff. So, like, I get the old school parkour stuff. I also was lucky enough to have a lot of business experience. I spent 10 years working full time as a like VP level corporate person in a $10 million martial arts and childcare business here in the Valley, and managed 5 different locations, teams of 30 people on the childcare side, a team of 100 people, obviously through direct reports. So like that, the management skills involved with that, the scaling of business involved with that, gave me a very unique perspective, different from people who have mostly just like been in this parkour space and that's their world, and they haven't worked like a big adult job. So I have more like adult people job experience than the average 20-year parkour vet. And that's a little bit of what Parkour Professionals brings to the table. Is like I've had to hire people, I've had to fire people, I've had to lead teams, I've had to figure out how to scale a business, I've had to negotiate leases, I've had to build handbooks, I've built to, work through HR issues and worker comps and everything in between, permitting with cities and states, and how to figure out salaries and tax issues. That's just like scary to a lot of people, and it's not scary to me because I've been lucky enough to just have that opportunity. So that was sort of the motivation for starting Parkour Professionals, which I originally did with two other people, and we're on great terms. But we decided like I'm a little bit more passionate about this than they are, and I wanted to move it harder, faster forward. And they're like, Adam, do it. Like, go, you got this. So now I'm just doing it myself. So Parkour Professionals is a fancy word for like me, Adam's combination of business background and parkour spirit put together to help make the world a better place. But yeah, I chose professionals intentionally because I think we all recognize that maybe we need more of that. Yeah, and so I help do that.
Yeah. I was exposed to that first when Christine and I started dating, and getting to see the like and hear about a 9 to 5 job, because I got into parkour coaching at 16, basically the day that I turned 16, and then that was just my job until I moved out here and worked in coffee. I was like, I've literally never had I had never been a standard employee. And when you're working in parkour coaching, at first, similarly to you, I was working at gymnastics gym. None of them knew anything about parkour. I had no oversight. There were no certifications at the time. So you're just kind of freestyling it.
Mhm.
And then when you get into a world, like you say, where you're like, oh, I really want to like open a gym, but how do I even start to go about that? It's
Yeah.
nice to have guidance. And I think there's also a fear that embracing some of the structure, because there's a lot of structure in corporate America that's very sclerotic and unproductive. I mean, I think that every bureaucracy has, and everybody who has worked in any kind of corporate job can point to like, there's the one person that doesn't really do anything and somehow they're paid 6 figures. And you're just like, okay, so you move paper
Yeah.
and data around and put it in somebody else's court for them to do. Got it. I think a lot of parkour people see that and we're like efficiency minded, and we go, well, if I just get rid of all of the structure, I can rebuild it from scratch. And then we realize how much actually effort it is to rebuild it. And all of a sudden you've, spent your loan and your gym's not
I
open
mean,
and you're waiting
parkour
for
people
permits.
love to reinvent the wheel. It's like a thing we do. Like you could even
Yeah.
say, like even from the exercise science point of view, the founders were like, "What if we did this to get strong?" And it's like you realize that there are books written on how to do that, like way better. Like as much as I love old school training, it's like crawling upstairs backwards is not the penultimate way to get strong.
It's
It is
great for mental toughness,
it
but
exactly
yeah.
different road, right? Like, and that's
Yeah.
what they were looking for, but they didn't have the right words for it. So yes, I think that like we love to reinvent things, and as someone who comes from like the martial arts business background, having successfully run like $2 million a year of like martial arts operations out of 5 locations, like martial arts has been doing a lot of a lot of things wrong, and I will not waste the viewer's time with those things. I bet we all kind of have a sense of that. But a lot of things right. I mean, they know how to do sales structures. They know how to build curriculums that keep attrition really high, like good quality ones too. They know how to
Hmm.
market. They know how to advertise. They know what websites work. They know, how to keep parents engaged. They know how to create a space in a lobby and how to interact with parents. Those practices have been around for 3 times longer than parkour in the U.S. And as you walk around your town, how many karate schools, jiu-jitsu schools, taekwondo schools do you see? I mean, there's like 5 in every city. That's for a reason, because there are like some basic fundamental structures that have sort of been somehow taught and implemented across the martial arts world, and not everybody follows them. There's some crazy schools out there, don't get me wrong. But by and large, you walk into a karate school, you know what to expect because they are following a model. And it's a model that works to the
Hmm.
point of sometimes I walk into a place and I go, I can't believe how many small business owners I know that are struggling, and this place is alive. Like this place has been here for 10 years. Like that guy's a douchebag. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. But it's because they just have things that work. And so I'm not that special. I wish I could say that like I have some incredible patented things that I've invented that I have all should keep all the credit for. It's not even true. I just know what systems work because I've seen it. And the only real thing I've done is taking things that work from a business, from a customer service, from a student learning point of view that are very clearly, visibly successful in the martial arts world, and taken my extensive parkour experience and integrated it into what I think is
Hmm.
authentic to parkour, and then I'm trying to push that forward in the parkour world. Let's be professionals. Let's do what we know works, and transition that. And that's a little bit of what the work is all about.
Yeah. So in application, because I want to kind of tie us back to what we were talking about in the beginning, because I see how passionate you are about the spirit of parkour. And like you said, if this is all coming from this lens of character development, I think that, and this is also probably worth saying, and I know a lot of the listeners are maybe not as interested in the business stuff. And are a little bit more interested in the training stuff. But I think that that is also a reason why we struggle so much, is
Yeah.
that people start to tune out for the lowest hanging fruit that will help them succeed. And part of being able to create, being able to share the spirit of the sport is that when a parent walks in, like the coach is on time, they have showered that day, like they don't necessarily look like they're trying to sell some woo-woo thing, but
Mhm.
like you obviously people will have different characteristics, and everybody's looking for something slightly different. But like what I guess does a successful program look like to you from like a sharing the spirit perspective, and how how do you what are the low-hanging fruits? Not and it doesn't need to be super technical, like, well, people should use QuickBooks or like, but what are the low-hanging fruits that you see in parkour education, whether it's outdoors or indoors,
Yeah.
um, that you'd love to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think like there's really three like giant levers in running a membership based business that is something like parkour. You have your like what I'm going to call lead generation. Your marketing, your advertising, your funnel of getting people in. Some businesses need very little. Sometimes they run by reputation. They've been around for a while, or they're just in a city that's like or maybe you have great visibility because you have a spot on the road that 20,000 cars see a day. So everybody's unique in that, but you need to garner attention. You can't run a business without people knowing you're there and inquiring about it. So lead inquiry is one of those things. The second thing is like your sales conversions, which most people hate the notion of, but it's, in my opinion, the most powerful lever. Your conversions are if someone's interested, do you get them in for an appointment? Can you convert them into a membership? Can you like walk them through the processes of getting where they need to be? And the better, the more efficient you are at converting them along those stages, the more you sort of out of the funnel pour more
Mhm.
students who are now members of your program and engaged in some way. And then that sort of third lever is your retention. Are you actually keeping students, and are they remaining there, or do you have a high turnover rate? And like there's a relationship between all those different levers, right? You could dump way more money on advertising, and just by doubling your leads, you will double how many people you enroll, but you're working twice as hard to do it and spending more money. You can make all your conversions twice as good, and you'll convert actually more than double your members. But it doesn't matter if your program's bad and people are quitting. You're just going to be forever dealing with new people and trying to sell your program that isn't real. Or you could do none of those things and just try to keep all of your students, which some people are going to quit no matter how good you think. People move, people's jobs change, kids have other
Mhm.
responsibilities, but you can minimize
And
that and then grow. So
and
for
I'll
I
say
think
I think that third lever too, the retention lever, is the one that so many parkour people are the most passionate about.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's the one that I see a lot of gyms really pouring their time into, is like,
they
we don't
do,
care
and
how many people walk in the door. We're going
we're just going
they're
to do
not
right
always
by
doing
the
it
people we have.
efficiently,
And
but yeah,
I
we're
think
going to do
what
the right by the people we have.
if I can be a little risky in what I'm about to say, I think that people are doing the wrong thing to pull that lever most of the time. Because we're thinking about, well, what do I love about parkour? I build my gym so that it's got the kind of moves that I want to do as a 20-something-year-old parkour passionate coach. Or
Hmm.
I want to give my coaches freedom in curriculum because I want them to teach whatever they want to teach because that's what feels authentic to me from parkour. So they're doing things that feel like they're thinking this is what makes a quality program. And going back to what I said before, we just know things from the past decades of pedagogy and child development and membership based business practices, that like there are certain things that are going to help kids stay for a longer period of time, and there are certain things that aren't. Parkour's mostly adopted some kind of progressive system. Is it wristbands? Is it different color t-shirts? Is it a skill sheet that they track? Is it a chart on the wall? Whatever. The equivalent of belts in karate. Like, colored belts in karate is not a traditional thing. That is an American-made recent invention. It is not a thing they do in the Shaolin Temple. It is not a thing that they did anything before, like the 70s. That is fully like a marketing invention done by modern American martial arts culture. But it works. I don't know how I feel about the rank part of it. I think that gets leaned in pretty hard. But a visible, measurable form of achievement that helps kids understand where they stand, where they've come from, and what goals they have ahead of them, it works. And the martial arts industry has attrition rates half or less of what I've witnessed in parkour. I don't have perfect data, but I'm doing my best over the past couple of years to collect data. I'll have an industry survey coming out a little bit later this year. And I mean, I think our average attrition rate, which is the rate of people you lose, our average attrition rate is like in excess of 10 to 15% for the average parkour gym. Martial arts is 3%. And that's because
Wow.
for them, retention means we provide clear goals, clear feedback. Kids know what they've succeeded, and they operate in a very structured environment. Kids want to know. Adults too. I keep saying kids, like that's it, but that is our biggest market. So you'll catch me saying kids a lot. Kids want to know if they're successful. Kids want to know where they stand, and they want to know what to expect and what to look forward to. So when you have a program that feels really authentic, but the coach just kind of randomly decides what to teach every day, and there's no forward progress or backwards measurement, and it's just sort of like, hey, we're just moving and training and doing skills, that does not impact retention in the way that people, well, it impacts retention, but not in the way that people think that it will. So there's some lessons in every one of those stages, I think, for parkour gym
Hmm.
owners that is really powerful. And so education in each one of those things is, I think, like one of the things I focus on. Is what lead generation systems you need to implement, what membership structures actually build trust with clients as opposed to break it. And um, I think like the heart, there are people who go, well, are you McDojoing parkour? Are you dumbing it down to the point of it's not even a real practice anymore? And I guess my argument to that is like access. I don't think anybody disagrees with the concept of creating better access for people. And the truth is that the more authentically you practice parkour, I would argue the less accessible it becomes in our business format in the world. Who could keep up with the founders? Whoever the heck could keep up with the founders, and that's like the most
Hmm.
extreme version of like parkour was not an accessible sport in the beginning. I know everyone talks about that because you could copy a video and buy shoes, but if you wanted to train with those guys, they were like, keep up, good luck, and then they ran off and disappeared for miles and did crazy stuff, and if you lost them, you lost them. And if you wanted to quit, they were like, go get a croissant, have a nice day, we don't care about you anymore. That's like traditional parkour training. So that's not really accessible. What is accessible is having a curriculum built that made sense, a curriculum that allows children or students or adults to train, whether it's like the Parkour Gen Boston community, who has like an amazing number of seniors training, PK Silver. Like these are structured programs that create access because of intentionality. And so I think like I spent a lot of time convincing people that like putting some intention and some structure and some education into your program may feel like you're losing the authenticity of parkour, but you're actually creating more access. And that will result in students staying longer, which means you have to spend less money on marketing and don't have to worry about sales as
Hmm.
much, et cetera, et cetera. So each of these levers are a thing to pull.
It also, to the point of retention, because this is the one that I'm the most interested in, because I see how many people fall out of it, and some of it is inescapable. Some of it is like it's a bunch of 16-year-old boys that get tired of having an adult tell them what they want to do, and they get
Sure.
their first girlfriend and their first job, and it's like, see you later. I'll come back to this community in 5 years after they break up with me.
Yeah.
There's also, to your point, a lot of low-hanging fruit, and I think what you'd mentioned about the lessons that we have learned that have been established in pedagogy, now as a parent, I think I appreciate it even more. You cannot apply a framework that is fundamentally like freedom oriented, that can work great for somebody who's 16 to 20 or
Okay.
14 to 20, where they want to be able to learn and make mistakes on their own and, just get a little bit of feedback once in a while, but they really want to be able to explore that map that we talked about
Yeah.
with guidance, but without hand holding. For a 6 to a 12 or 13 or even a 14-year-old, they want to know that they're doing something right, and their parents, who are the ones that are paying for them in this framework, want to know that they're not wasting their money. So I think that we also have this tendency, and in adults you see it as well. I think there's this kind of inverse parabola where structure, and this kind of goes to our narrative of around also the story that we're telling about the benefits of parkour, whether we're going for the broader physical benefit messaging and the broader like psychosocial benefits of the challenge or the skill and technical benefits. There is a narrow point that's probably 5 to 10 years where you have that combination of intense freedom, very self-guided learning, a more variable environment, right? And that combines really well with skill heavy and technical heavy progression. When you try and take that framework, both of those things, the coaching approach and the environmental approach and kind of the narrative, and then you apply that to people in their 30s, you apply that to people under the age of 14 or 15, I think that there's a huge disconnect that happens because and that to me is something that I think we're still trying to figure out. And I guess that's also my question when I was asking how you fit this in and what your recommendations are. How would you address in kind of like a practical way? Like, what's your dream class experience or vibe check like for a youth class and that older class? And like you said, you have those a couple things, the low hanging fruit, the measurable progressions, knowing that you're succeeding and that there's something to move toward. What are the goals that you would like to see more parkour gyms or coaches set for their students, and what does that general framework feel like in terms of the actual practice?
Yeah. One of my superpowers, I think, in life is the sort of like I have a hard time living in the moment, and I spend a lot of time like living 5 years from now, and it makes me a great business owner. It
Anxiety.
makes me a
Yeah.
great leader, and it makes me very bad at getting everything done on my daily to do list. Um, but the power of that kind of vision is this: is like I mentioned before, like I have my mission statement, make the world a better place by improving the character of the people who are in it. So of course I have a bias to like the dream of my gym, which is all I can
Hmm.
speak to in that sense, is that like every student who passes through it leaves with some kind of profound experience that makes them go, I'm a more powerful, I'm a more capable, I'm someone who can change the world in a great way because of the intrinsic development that's occurred within me through this experience. Like I want every child, adult, coach, employee, or parent who interacts with my business. I want the whole community to have like made some paradigm shifts and realizations about like power that's inside of them. There's the dream, if you will. But I think, and I wouldn't want to impose that upon everybody. There's plenty of programs who are like, Adam, that's awesome, and also like not what I dream of. So I don't necessarily need to impose that upon the world, but I do think you have to ask yourself, what does my program achieve in the long term, not just this week? A lot of coaches are like, I taught a fun class. Well, great. I mean, trampoline parks are fun too. Laser tag is fun too. But what are you doing that's meaningful, impactful? Because you've had fun parkour sessions, but I think if you and I reflect on our parkour training, there's like deep, profound meaning from the collective experience of it, from the lessons that have been learned and the movement we made from this point in our life to that point in our life and what we had to kind of realize to get there. There's so much power and profoundness in that experience. And so, like, I think in whether it's through a competition format or whether it's through a very heavy S&C development paradigm or whether it's through skill development or whether it's because you want to build kids to become social media stars, I guess if that's your goal, slight bias against that path for whatever reasons. If you whatever the dream is, like, is your programming built to do that in the long term? And from a business point of view, is that what you're communicating, messaging, and selling? Is that the narrative of your business? Do you just keep kids active and make them have fun? If so, you're going to be competing with every whatever physical activity in your city. But as soon as you elevate the messaging of your program to whatever your vision is, as the founder of that business, as the head coach of that program, if you have influence in like the purpose of your program, then you need to be communicating that and then making decisions that shape it, which is why that intentionality is important. It's just not enough to me, in my opinion. It's not enough to run a fun, cool, exciting, pick generic positive term program that kids like. I know they'll give you positive feedback that day. You know, you could just play a game all parkour class, and the kids will tell you they had a great class. And obviously, games are great. I love games as a tool. But if you're just randomly playing games with no long-term goal or no intentional development, you're not really serving the student as a professional coach, are you? You have to kind of decide what is the outcome. You know, Jesse plays a lot of games at Movement Creative, very game-oriented, play-oriented business model, but there's a vision there. There's something that Jesse and his team is trying to create, and games are their vehicle. Maybe comps are your vehicle. Maybe conditioning is your vehicle. Maybe a band system that's very martial artsy is your vehicle. All those are valid vehicles. To what end? I think you have to decide that as a business owner or even as an employee who's a coach. You know, what am I trying to do 5 years from now with each of my students? And am I putting structures in place that are going to make sure that happens? Are they measurable? Do they exist? Am I communicating them? That's, I think, first of all, what will impact your retention, but also what keeps you from burning out as a coach. That's what, you know, if your coaches are, you know, you're having a hard time keeping your coaches engaged, you know, nothing matters more than impact in this generation of workers and employees. So, you know, do they know the impact they're making? Are they getting feedback on the changes that have occurred with their students over the years? If so, they probably love their job, even though it's hard on some days. They probably sleep great that night knowing that, like, man, even though that was exhausting, like, this is so meaningful what I do. And then the same is true for the owner, except there's even more weight and more responsibility and more crap you have to deal with if you own your own business. But you get to go to sleep at night knowing that, like, man, I've been around for 15 years with my business and I have changed thousands of lives. Like, it's worth it. It's worth dealing with this form from the IRS and figuring out what I have to do about it or whatever, because I know that, like, this work is making a difference. I just think it's so important that we do that work, or else this is, you know, it's hard to keep going. It's hard to have that purpose. And so, yeah, that's sort of the work of Parkour Professionals is like, let's create the structure, that understanding, that vision, that purpose, that mission. So even though I do a lot of implementing business systems and I do a lot of teaching people how to do sales better, I think most of what I do is like, let's explore your mission together. Let's explore your why. Our tagline is passion to profession. You know, like, what are you trying to do? What's the passion? What's the mission? And then let's just figure out what basic steps. It's not rocket science. I would love to pretend it is, and that I'm worth millions of dollars to you because, you know, I have these secrets. I don't. My gift is, how do I take that thing that you really believe in, connect with it, and then just match it to correct business principles so that it moves forward.
That's a fantastic way to think through it. I think what really resonated with me there as well is as you were chatting about the fallout of short-term thinking, that just feels like, and you had said it, I think that, you know, you're like, this is just my perspective, and I think this is what would work. We're seeing that the current way that a lot of facilities run doesn't work. The
Mm.
day to day, like, let's just make a fun space for people to play in. The way that a lot of us train parkour now at this stage of our lives, it isn't getting across the message that I think most gym owners have, the passion, and being able to connect that to an existing framework, like taking what your vision is and mapping it out and stepping back and saying, okay, actually, now that I look back, there's no, this breadcrumb trail isn't leading anywhere.
Yeah,
And I
right. I
think
mean,
that
it's
the students feel that.
I sometimes feel like a jerk, but I think it's necessary to my work. Is like, I'll ask people, what's important to you? What do you believe? What are your values? Like, tell me about what's, and they go, this, that, this, that. I'm like, cool. How many students do you have? They're like, 32. I'm like, okay. You know, like, I don't know that you're getting what you want. You know, like, is that good enough for you? And if the answer is yes, all I want to do is deeply impact these 32 people with my very particular method. I'm not gonna knock it. That's fine. But I think 99% of people would agree that, like, no, I'd actually love to do way more than that. And so for me, it's just like, I'm just doing a lot of paradigm shifting with people and having conversations on, if that's really what you believe, and I think that's a great thing to believe. I mean, I haven't met a person yet. Every client that I talk to, I resonate with them. I'm like, I get it. Like, that's your mission is very close to mine. Like, I really want to see you succeed because it's the exact same thing that I want to do in life. It's just that like the way you're going about it isn't as effective as you think it is, and that's mostly the work. And it's things as simple as, let me give you a concrete example. I'm Mr. Two times a week, and I get a lot of flack for that. But I mean, almost every program, because they think they should. They go, oh, I should have a one time a week option for $120 a month, and then I should have a two time a week option for $180 a month, and then I should have this option. And then if I ask them, hey, like what are most of your students on? They go, one time a week. I go, yeah, it makes sense. Most people will go for whatever the lower level option that you have is as an entry point. If you don't have a structure to move them up in, then they're just going to stay there forever because that's the nature of human behavior. I'll say, okay, and let me ask you this question. Like, the students that are most impacted by your program, the ones that really receive the mission more than any of them, is it the once a week people, the twice a week people, the unlimited class people? Which grouping is it? And undoubtedly, it's either the twice a week people or the unlimited people, depending on the nature of the program. Sometimes the unlimited people are the ones who like abuse and use the space, but aren't really training. Or sometimes they have a great program, and the more that they participate, the better they're pulled into the culture or the training methodology. It's never the one time a week kids or one time a week adults or students. And I'm not saying you can't offer an option that creates that access, but if your goal is to make an impact, if your goal is to do ABC to help kids develop character, to make them stronger, to make them more confident, whatever the case may be, is seeing them one time a week what you want. Well, then why is that the thing you would offer in your sales process? Like, let's not even talk about the money. Obviously, them paying more is good for your business, but let's not even talk about that. Who cares? What if we made the price the same for all the options? Which one would you want them to do? And the answer is always at least twice a week. So there's simple things that's like, I know you wanted to create access and you wanted to be flexible and you wanted to like do something that feels reflective of what parents or students seem to want. We're the experts. We're the parkour people. We know that training once a week isn't enough. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's not enough either. And so if we can stand in front of a parent or a student confidently and say, I recommend twice a week and here's why, as a minimum. This is what you need to do. I think in my experience, most parents or students go, okay, yeah, fair enough. I believe you. Like, I want what we've talked about, so I'll move forward with what you say is right. And so I'm a big believer in like 2 times a week minimum as from a business practice point of view. And it has nothing to do with the money. I mean, the money is good, but that's not my main point. My main point is like, you're not doing the mission if you're not getting the kids to train more. Or the students to train more. So that's one of 100 examples of like you're formatting your business in a way that's not actually serving what you're trying to achieve. And so just pointing all those different examples out and getting buy-in on changing them is pretty much the work of parkour professionals.
Fantastic. I'm gonna ask one final question, which I always like
Okay,
to ask
I'm ready.
everybody. Yeah, do you have a recommendation for the audience? Any kind of media?
Any piece of advice? Is that what you're saying?
Sorry, any piece of media. So it could be like a
Oh,
book, a film,
media.
music recommendation for the audience, and it does
Yes.
not have to be related to parkour.
No, I love it. I think it applies to everything we've talked about today. It's one of my most favorite recent reads. It's a book from Michael Easter called Comfort Crisis. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Max. Okay. Uh, I just think it's one of those like, if ever you just want to read a book that never utters the word parkour, but then go like, whoa, like this is it. Like, I resonate so deeply with the concepts in this book. Comfort Crisis will do it for you. Comfort Crisis follows a guy who realized that like, oh man, like for me to really get everything out of my life, I need to be uncomfortable. I need to like experience what it is to not, have everything I want all the time and feel inconvenienced by the things I don't get. It's a really fun book to read. It's kind of half of the narrative and then half of science and all the stuff behind it. Very entertaining, easy to read. Michael Easter also does podcasts now. I think I was actually on my drive from the airport this morning. I was listening to him and a guest. But it's just whether you're looking at business or whether you're looking at coaching or whether you're just looking at your own training practice. I think there are principles and concepts in that book that will so deeply resonate with you in the way of pushing our boundaries and learning who we are, in the way of understanding like physiologically why it's so important for our minds and our bodies to go through that change. And I think it'll inspire maybe the changes you need to make in your business. It'll inspire the curriculum adjustments that your students need to actually get benefit. It'll inspire why training is so important. For me, it was just another one of those like, oh yeah, this is why I love parkour. Like parkour is such a great vehicle for making this thing happen. And so I really recommend that book if you're looking for something to spark you a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree. I listened to the audiobook and it's very good. It's a good all anything that falls parkour adjacent like that I love because to your point, it's another way that you can articulate those broad goals of your program to people. And when it's in more in the public consciousness or you're finding ways to tap into what's out there, whether it's kind of like you can get your kid off devices, you
Mhm.
can address the obesity epidemic, we're understanding the value of discomfort and learning. It all just builds that language ecosystem and gives you the tools that you can use to connect with people where they're at as opposed to having to bring them to where you're at, which
Yes,
is
yeah.
fantastic.
Parkour is full of jargon and language. I mean, we have to. Whenever I do sales, I have to work with people. It's like stop saying those words. Nobody knows what those words mean. And yeah, so to read a book like Comfort Crisis or The Anxious Generation, which is a little more parenting oriented, but a
Hmm.
great book, things that are just like, hey, here's modern science and what we're realizing about our behavior and what's happened in the past 20 years of life, 30 years of life, and how it's changing because it is so rapidly changing. It gives you great tools either to understand yourself or if you're a sales or a coach person to like have language to pass that on to students. That is, by the way, science backed. I mean, you know, you can read the book and
Yeah.
you're gonna want to go research about 20 articles to get a deeper understanding of what's being referenced in that book because there's so much value there. So yeah, I love Comfort Crisis. I think it's a must read for anyone in modern society.
Sweet. Where can people find you before we log off on this?
Oh, I'm so bad at that, Max. I'm like, you can find me on Instagram and you'll see nothing but a bunch of baby photos that my wife posted and I'm tagged in. I
Where's
guess,
the best place to find parkour
yeah,
professionals?
you
Where
could just
should
go
they
to
reach out to you?
parkourprofessionals.com. That's where you could, yeah, parkourprofessionals.com. If you are a gym owner and you're in the Parkour Gym Owners Facebook group, which you should be, I am a very active member in that community where we do a lot of talking and sharing ideas and concepts. So that's a good place to like interact with me as well. Go to American Rendezvous, go to Adapt courses to further your training, go to Move NYC. You'll see me and my toddler and my wife hanging out. Yeah, lots of places to find me. But yeah, if you wanna learn more about Parkour Professionals or just chat with me, parkourprofessionals.com.
Sweet. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been really, really fun getting to catch up and hear everything you got going on right now.
Thanks, Max. I appreciate it. You're always such a pleasure to talk to and spend time with. You're a real gift to the community, my friend.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. I may be on hiatus next week. We'll see. I've got a couple podcasts lined up, but I am also going to be in Austin at a strength and conditioning conference trying to share the good word of parkour with a bunch of very, very knowledgeable people who know a lot more about training and sports performance than I do. I'm really looking forward to learning from some of the best in the field, bringing back some fantastic takeaways for parkour people and maybe getting a couple of them to jump around and do some landings and balance on rails. But we will see about the latter part. Definitely, the learnings are guaranteed, and I'm excited to bring that into some future episodes for y'all. In the meantime, I'm going to do my best to get an episode out next week, but if you don't hear from me, you know what happened. If it's not next week, I'll see you the week after. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and I hope you have a great day.